In the final section of Chapter 2 of Methodical Realism, Gilson discusses the Thomistic method. He begins by contrasting Spinozism and Thomism. He quotes Spinoza saying, "The scholastics start from things, Descartes starts from thought, I, Spinoza, start from God." Gilson notes that it is impossible to deduce the existence of the world from the existence of God. This is because creation is a free act of the divine will. There is also a metaphysical fissure between necessary and contingent being, between uncreated and created being, such that the latter cannot be deduced from the former. There is a similar fissure in our knowledge, says Gilson. Human minds cannot have God as their proper object. As we are created being, our minds are directly proportioned only to other created being. And for these reasons, Spinozism is totally incompatible with Thomism. No legitimate Thomism can contain even a trace of Spinozistic thinking. This is not the case with Cartesianism, however. Cartesianism shares some principles with Thomism, but they are opposed in their methods. We can see this first in the direction of inference, where Thomas infers from reality to possibility, and Descartes infers from possibility to reality. Note, please, the erratum in the text on page 53. We also see the difference in methods in their different theories of knowledge. Gilson tells us that Thomas finds thought in being, and Descartes finds being in thought. What does this mean, though, to say that Thomas finds thought in being? It means that human thought left to its own resources cannot have actual knowledge of itself. On its own, human thought has the power of knowing, but lacks the power of knowing itself specifically. And this is because it knows itself only in the act of knowing something else. In other words, I would say, Descartes' cogito is impossible. The self cannot know itself as self without objects. It has to have some content. In order to have actual knowledge, the human mind must have sense objects and hence real things. If there were no things, Thomas says, there would be no knowledge. The order of human knowing begins with the being of the apprehended object. This is reality itself, not the apprehended as Noel would have it. What confronts us then is an apprehended reality, not an apprehension of the real. Note in those two expressions which term is the noun and which is the modifier. The order of the human intellect lies at the heart of teaching, Gilson says. Consider the nature of the human intellect contrasted with divine and angelic intellect. Unlike God, our intellect is not identical to our own essence, and unlike angels, our intellect does not have itself as its own proper object. Human intellect must have some extrinsic object for its proper object. This is why the object which the intellect apprehends must be something extrinsic as such. We have to go outside of ourselves in order to activate our process of knowing, and only afterwards do we come back to a type of self-knowledge. So the order of human knowing goes this way. First, the intellect grasps a nature inhabiting an existence that is different from its own. It has to go outside of itself. Second, the intellect, by reflection, grasps the act by which it knows the object. And then third, the intellect, by still further reflection, grasps itself as the knower, the agent performing the act of knowing, through which the first act of grasping the thing, the external thing, was done. Gilson notes that what is first given to us is the existence of things, and therefore it is unwise for us to try, as Noel does, to divide this given into the apprehended and the existence of the apprehended. The apprehended, Gilson says, is like the extrinsic within the intrinsic. It's the thing outside of me, within my mind, within my perceptions. But our intellects, Gilson says, tend toward the extrinsic as extrinsic. That is our proper object. To attempt Noel's way is to defend Scholastic Realism with an alien method, a method not suited to it, says Gilson. He writes, Scholastic Realism does not rest on metaphysical reasoning, because if this reasoning began with God, it would never be able to reach contingent objects. We cannot deduce the contingent from the necessary. And if reasoning began with a contingent object, it would never be able to reach any different contingent object because of the analogy of being. There is a metaphysical gap even between different contingent objects. The solution for Gilson is to note that we do not reach the object by reasoning of any kind. Rather than the subject finding its object through an analysis of knowledge, it discovers its knowledge and itself in the analysis of the object. Therefore, the outside world's existence is known by us on the direct evidence of sensory intuition. Descartes' error was to attempt to turn the sensory evidence into a rational deduction or induction, which must inevitably fail since sensory evidence belongs to a different order from deduction and induction. Gilson then raises the question, why did St. Thomas not answer the critical question? Why did he not consider separately the question of the external world's existence? And the answer is that for St. Thomas, all actual existence is individual and singular beings as such are known through the sense faculty. So the solution to the question, what exists, must come through the senses for St. Thomas. It was Descartes' mathematicism which led him to mistrust the senses, and this set up his epistemology for failure. The best idealist systems, Gilson concludes, are beautiful and consistent in themselves, but have the very serious flaw of being detached from reality. Realism, including Scholastic Realism, can engage with these systems and learn from them, but only if realism bases itself on the direct grasp of the existence of things through the senses. This brings us to the end of Chapter 2. Goodbye.